This is our female parenti. Now she's about 4 years old, and the last measurement we gave her was about 1.70 m long. She'll live to about 50 years of old, 50 years of age, and that worked better. And the parenti is Australia's largest monitor species, or goanna, and the third largest species in the world. So you've got the Komodo dragon, then you've got the Asian water monitor, and then you've got the parenti. Now these guys have a type of venom in their gums, which they kind of ooze in when they bite down. They've also got razor sharp teeth. So when these guys bite, they'll kind of munch down with their incredible jaw pressure, ooze the venom into the bite, and lacerate as well. They've also got really sharp claws and a very long tail that they'll curl up and strike out if they need to. This girl did bite me once. Oh, not this one, but we had another one that did bite me. It was entirely my fault. I was handling the mice in front of the enclosure, and then I went to feed it a tray of chicken. And because we train these guys, we put our hands in the enclosure right in front of them, and they kind of come up and lick us on the hands. And that's how we get them used to us. And eventually they'll get the courage and they'll kind of climb up onto you. But because I did this and I didn't wash my hands when I had the mice on top of me, it just kind of smelt the hand, munched on, dragged me into the enclosure. Now it wasn't too much of a problem, because although it was incredibly painful, I'd moved exactly with the parenti and didn't pull away at all. Now because they've got really razor sharp teeth, if I had pulled away at all, it would have sliced the tendons. And as you can see, these guys' claws, if you can kind of have a look, they're incredibly sharp as well. She's not really digging in at the moment because she's quite relaxed, even though she's kind of climbing up on my head here. But it is a new thing for her being up on stage, so she's a little bit agitated, I guess. But you can see the throat just underneath. When they're a bit upset, they'll puff that throat out and they'll hiss a bit and they'll curl their tail up. So these guys they're not really inclined to kind of strike out as a defensive move. They're much more inclined to kind of give you a bit of a bluff and then move away. Now, in Australia, we've got a large number of species of goanna. The largest one is the parenti, and the ones you guys see up in the bush, the black and white ones, they're most likely the lace monitor. Now they're also going to they're not afraid of us, but they aren't going to really bother us if we leave them alone and don't offer them any food, of course. They do have an incredible food response. The lace monitors more so than these ones. And so if you try to feed them a sausage, they might mistake your hands and kind of give you a nasty nip. But if you leave them alone, they're pretty much just going to cruise about. They're kind of the apex predator as well. So these ones in the wild, they'll eat anything from taipans. They'll chase down a rabbit. They've got the speed in them to and the endurance to chase down a rabbit. They'll use this throat, and they'll kind of puff the throat up and down and pump the air into the lungs while they're chasing down the rabbit. And even if they can't catch the rabbit initially, they'll just track it down with their tongue. They've got the forked tongue, which they use to track down smells, and each side of the tongue will bring the scents into the top of the throat where the Jacobson's organ is, and that kind of helps them pinpoint the prey. So whichever side of the tongue, the forked tongue, has a stronger smell, that's the side that they'll go to try and hunt down the prey. And these guys can obviously dig quite well with the claws, so even if they're hunting down a rabbit, they'll go into the burrow. Now rabbits aren't their natural food source because rabbits are introduced to Australia, but they've become quite good at hunting them down. And this one could probably swallow a full-grown rabbit. They don't have the dislocated jaw like the snakes do. The snakes can dislocate their jaw and kind of swallow their food. The goannas, they've got kind of a double jointed jaw. So it's a little bit stronger and it doesn't quite open as wide, but they can still swallow things much larger than you'd normally think. And when they do bite on, and they go to swallow something quite large, they'll find a rock or a branch or something and kind of try to shove the food into their mouth. And if that doesn't work, they'll use their claws to kind of slice it up and make it a bit smaller. And when these guys are hunting like a taipan or a brown snake or a red belly or something like that, because they've got the speed and the sharp teeth, they'll run in, they'll grab the snake around the middle, they'll thrash it about really quick, knocking the snake on the head most likely, or just slicing it up, and then they'll swallow it down. And so the other prey items they'll eat the small roos, they'll eat other goannas. There was a picture a while back of one of these fellas cruising about with a goanna about half his size, so still quite a large goanna, just sitting half out of his mouth. Now these guys have incredibly strong digestive juices in their belly, so this goanna, what it was waiting for was for the other half of the goanna that it was eating to digest before it swallows the back half of the goanna. Now the other interesting thing about these guys is, I've just lost my train of thought, but they're quite a magnificent animal. They'll shed their scales just like other reptiles. These ones actually have like little tiny bones, just like the Komodo dragon, underneath their scales. So that kind of helps them when they're doing battle with other monitors, or they're getting bitten by other animals. So it's like an extra kind of layer of armor plating. Now the other thing about these guys, there was an ancient lizard in Australia called the Megalania, and that lizard grew to about 7 meters in length, and it would take on animals, the megafauna of Australia, so animals kind of the size of rhinos or elephants, take them down using the same tools that this guy uses, like the sharp teeth and the venom and the really quick movements. Now this guy's this guy's the closest living relative to the Megalania. It used to believe that the Komodo dragon was the closest living relative just because it's the largest goanna about, but the skeletons they found showed that it was actually the parenti that is the closest living relative of the Megalania. And these guys also have a thing called indeterminate growth, which means that they can grow for as long as they live. So after the first 5 years, the growth rate is dramatically dropped down, and then after that they just keep growing. So essentially, if you get an animal and you provide it with a constant source of heat and a constant source of food, they can grow to an enormous size. This one, for instance, at about 1.5 years was the size of its parents. So it was about 1.20 meters at about 1.5 years, and now it's about, well, the last measurement was about 1.70 meters, and that was at the start of spring. So we'll be doing a measuring video later on in the season and see how much it's grown. But this one will live to about 50 years, so we're hoping, even though she's a female, to get her up to about 4 meters in length. Most of the records in Australia say they grow to upwards of 3.5 meters. Now the common lace monitors that you see up in the bush, they'll probably grow to about 2.5 meters, but they'll be a lot more bulky than these guys. They've also got slightly different temperaments, so this and behavioural patterns. So this one, although when it is younger they do climb trees, when they're this size and any older and any bigger, they're not really going to climb too much. They're mainly going to run around the ground, dig burrows, move about. The lace monitors you'll see up and down the bush, even when they're really large, they'll climb the trees. Now, it's not to say they don't have sharp claws and they don't have the capacity to climb. They're just not very good at it. You can see I'm kind of tilting back when I'm holding this fella, just so that she doesn't fall off. And the other thing about these guys, if you have a look at her tail, it's right at the base of the tail. The goannas and other lizards, they'll store the excess food that they eat in the base of their tail. So you can see she's got a really fat base of the tail there, and that means she's going for a walk. So as you can see, she's quite gentle. I'm not worried at all about these claws, even though they have the capacity to kind of slice me open. I'm not really worried because she's not digging in. As long as I kind of support her body, She won't dig in. The thing about goannas is they're very, very intelligent creatures. We have lace monitors as well that climb up on us, and one of them, it learnt from me pulling away, it would dig into the shirt of my clothes, and then when it got to the skin, because it was digging into the skin, I would pull away slightly every time it was holding. And it learnt over time from me pulling away to go very, like it would smell my skin, and it would go very soft on the skin but dig into the clothes. So it kind of learnt that I didn't like being kind of dug into, and it just decided, well, or it decided that I don't like this person pulling away, but if I don't dig in, it doesn't pull away. It took a while for it to realise that my hair was not part of my clothes though, so it still dug into my hair on the head for a while, but she eventually learnt. In captivity, we feed this one mainly, she's very picky, so she doesn't like to eat any dead food or any food that's been there for a long period of time. So we mainly feed her fresh chicken, chicken drumsticks, so it's got the bone in there for her to digest the calcium, or a tray mix of, say, chicken hearts and chicken wingtips and roux meat steak. She doesn't like the cheap roux meat from the pet store. She only prefers the expensive kind of roux meat steak that you get from Woolworths, which is she's a very picky eater anyway. The lace monitors, on the other hand, they'll kind of eat anything. The longer it's been there, the more likely they are to eat it. This one doesn't like any prey items, so we can feed them dead rats or dead rabbits and dead chickens, but this one doesn't really go for those. It knows they're kind of deceased, and because it's the top predator, the apex predator. These ones have even been known to take on goannas as well. Not goannas, dingoes as well. So in that scenario, one this size, if it was one-on-one, both of them would probably end up losing their life or coming out quite bad. But if it was a pack of dingoes, for instance, you'd probably lose a couple of dingoes and you'd definitely lose the goanna. Apart from that, they don't really have a predator in the wild. When they're younger, they've got other goannas that'll pick them off, dingoes that'll pick them off. You've got the eagles that'll take them as well. They're kind of located in the centre of Australia, so Ayers Rock and right over to the kind of the coast of Western Australia as well. So they probably don't come into contact too much with crocodiles. Maybe freshwater crocodiles, if any, and the freshwater crocodiles aren't as big as the salties, so these guys at full grown aren't really going to be have too much to worry about from them. So, anyone got any questions about the Parenti? Pardon? Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, they're good, great animals. They're kind of like I like to compare them to kind of like dogs, because although they can do a lot of damage, if you raise the dog wrong, the dog can do a lot of damage as well. But if you raise the dog right, it's going to be a friendly animal. Same with the Parenti and other goannas. Like if you raise them right, they're gonna be very placid. You've still got to watch out around them, of course, because they're quite a lot of weaponry on these animals. Like the tail they'll curl it up and strike it out and use it as a whip. And you wouldn't want to cop that in the face or even on the leg, really. If you've ever been whipped by a towel, it could be quite painful. So yeah, we might put this guy back and get out a different animal and see how we go from there. We're not going to put this guy back to us yet, but we will get another animal out, and I'll do a talk about that one while this one crawls over my head. See, these guys, they're kind of their own boss. They kind of do what they want. when it wants to go down, it'll go down. We did a couple of shows during the holidays, and I had this guy. Oh, he might go down now. No, not yet. We had this guy out, and about an hour and a half into the show of me holding it, I thought, I'm getting pretty tired. I might want to put this guy down. And then it just, as I went to put it down, like you just saw, it climbed higher up, and I thought, well, better hold it out for the next hour and a half as well. Which can do your back in, because you're kind of bending back the whole time. Saying that, it's much easier when it's sitting on your shoulder like this, as long as it doesn't pop its claw across my face, but even then it's quite gentle. So what we've got here is the Woma python. Now the Woma python's a very interesting species in Australia. They're a python, so they're constrictors, and they're non-venomous, but they are immune to venom. So in the wild, these Woma pythons will also eat the venomous snakes. They're kind of a reptile-only species. So although in captivity we do feed them dead rats, but in the wild they'll eat anything they can overpower. So stuff like smaller goannas, smaller lizards, blue tongues or shinglebacks, and venomous snakes. They'll take on like the red bellies or the taipans. Now the ones that will win out, because the venom won't affect them. So if these guys get bitten by, say, a brown snake or a taipan, that's not going to affect these guys. But what will happen is the one that is the bigger snake and has the strength to wrap around and swallow them down will win out, even if they're both the same size, because the brown snakes and the taipans rely mainly on their venom more than their strangling. These ones will be a bit stronger in the body, so two snakes are the same size, the Womas will win out. Now they're not a particularly large snake. This one's probably getting close to full grown. There are kind of two different varieties of the Woma python, and one will grow a little bit larger than the other. The Woma pythons are also kind of more ground dwellers as well. So these ones are kind of hunt on the ground, whereas their cousin, the black-headed python, they kind of more hunt in the trees, but both of them are immune to venom. Now the other interesting thing about the Woma python is, well, it's not really interesting, it's kind of a bit sad. They're kind of endangered in the wild. So it's not really due to predators or anything like that, it's more just habitat loss. They kind of got the same kind of habitat as these guys, but they're a little bit less versatile. So logging or mining can kind of take away their habitat. They found kind of the lower end of Queensland, lower end of Northern Territory, and in kind of the middle of Western Australia. Now the goannas also have kind of a slight immunity to venom. The Komodo dragon, for instance, has a type of in their blood where we have antibodies in our system that kind of fight bacteria and fight disease. The goannas, like the Komodo, they actually have the antibodies in their blood that will adapt like a disease to any kind of infection that they get and be able to kind of change and mold and fight it off. And it works kind of a similar thing to kind of venom, so they've got a very good chance when they come up against the snake, even if they do get bitten. Well, we might get the green tree python out next and show you guys another interesting python. Now, after the show, about 12:30, we're going to be doing some holds just over to the side of the stage. We won't be doing holds with the goanna today, but we'll be doing holds with a bunch of other snakes and skinks. May even get the turtle out if you're lucky. So we've got here the shingleback today, the blue tongue, and here's the green tree python. So this one's she's a female. She's about 5 years old. Now the green tree python, if you hold the tail out, she's got what's called a caudal lure on the bottom of her tail. So it's a little kind of prehensile tail that's got a little tiny blue tip on the end, and she will wiggle that. She'll hang on a tree and she'll wiggle that about, and a little bird or a little frog will think that's a worm, come up, and then she'll strike it and wrap around and swallow it down. Now again, she's a python, so she doesn't use venom. She just kind of constricts her prey. And in the wild, her main prey would be birds or frogs, like the green tree frog you've probably seen, or a little tiny bird just after a worm. Also eats small geckos, and she's mainly in the trees, so any skinks that may find their way up in the trees she'll probably swallow down as well. Now, the interesting thing about the green tree python, the native Australian green tree python, and they're the ones that are kind of like this, so with the white spots all the way down the back. They start off kind of a bright yellow with little spots, little brown spots on them, and then about a year into their life, that yellow will slowly turn green, and then eventually they'll come out kind of bright green. Now, there's a New Guinea type of green tree python found as well, and they start off bright red, but they'll still turn green later on. So you won't really, the only way you'll know the difference really is the Australian green tree pythons. Once they both turn green, Australian green tree pythons will have the white spots down the back, and the New Guinea variety won't really have those ones. They'll have a bit more blue in them. This one's got a bit of blue in them as well. They're quite beautiful snakes, and they do make quite nice pets. They're quite friendly. Again, this one's 5 years old. She's eaten slowly. They do grow quite probably about double that size, and they can live to about 20 years. So she's still young, I guess. Still got a bit of life in her left. But we might get a different animal out next, and might get the frilly out and see how we go. Now, the frilly doesn't really, you guys might get lucky and might be able to see the frill. So our frill neck is very used to people. My colleague's just gonna just grab a hand towel or something. Just use the cloth. So it's very, very relaxed and very used to people, so it's not really going to frill up too much. However, it really gets a bit, it doesn't really like our parenti that much. In the wild, the parentis would prey on the frill necks, so it's probably a bit apprehensive of the parenti. But as you can see, this is the frill neck. It's eyeing off the parenti at the moment, but it's still not too worried. And you can see the frill just on the frill neck. So they've got the cartilage that runs along the top, and it's kind of a broken bit. If you have a look at the back of her, she's got two kind of frills. Like, it connects at the bottom, but it doesn't connect at the top. So she'll kind of stick that up with her jaw, open her mouth, and kind of chase after a predator or something like that. They'll also use it in courting when they find a female. This one's a male. This one's about 6 years old. They do grow a lot larger than this. This one is a Queensland variety frill neck, which they're generally, if you can have a look at this one, it's kind of more of a white phase frill neck. The Northern Territory variety, they're much larger and they're kind of a red phase. But when they do change the pigment in their skin, so it means these guys can kind of go dark brown, and a lot of the time they'll kind of stay more of a darker color. It's only when they're really warmed up and they're really comfortable that they're going to turn kind of bright white, or if they're the red phase ones from Northern Territory, kind of a deep dark red. These ones are, unlike your bearded dragons, which are mainly kind of insectivorous and they'll eat the fruit and veggies. These ones are much more carnivorous, so they'll eat as well as the insects. A lot of their diet's going to be small kind of rodents or small reptiles in the wild as well. So they'll eat skinks and geckos as well. They're tree climbers, like most of the ones we brought out today. As you can see, they've got quite sharp claws on them, and their scales are kind of sharp as well. If you rub your hand down after the show, we might have it out and you might get a chance to feel it and give it a hold. But if you rub your hand down the back of them, one way down, it's quite smooth, but if you rub it back the other way, it's really prickly scales. And that kind of helps them. Everything in a reptile is kind of designed or evolved in a way that minimizes the energy output. So because these guys love to sit in the tree, they love to sit in a tree kind of straight up and down. And they've got the sharp claws to kind of hang on, and the sharp pointy scales as well, so that it's not just their claws and their arms that they're using to kind of hold into a tree. They're kind of using their scales and everything at their disposal. It also means they can kind of go to sleep and not fall out of a tree. which is quite advantageous if they want to close their eyes and have a little nap. They very rarely go down to the ground. They will go down to the ground and run from tree to tree kind of thing, but they'll hunt in the trees. Our one, for instance, even though we've got an extremely large enclosure for it, we've got a bunch of trees in there. It mainly stays on the branches the whole time. It'll jump from branch to branch. They're quite good jumpers, quite good runners. They've got the large tail as well. The interesting thing about this fella, he gets really excited. If we feed him crickets, he'll get really excited about that, and he'll pop his tail straight up in the air, which is not very good for hunting crickets because it unbalances him terribly. So he kind of wobbles about then and just gets overexcited. So he's a bit special. Just like most of our animals, our green tree python fell out of the tree a while back, but they're yeah, kind of a bit special. All right, we'll grab another animal out. So we've got one more animal we'll bring out, and then we'll come down the side of the stage and we'll do some holds with some of the pythons and stuff. So make sure you come over and have a hold and have a pat of some of our animals. So this one's the shingleback lizard, which you'll be able to have a hold of down the side. Now the shingleback lizard, they're not really found in the Illawarra just because the moisture levels are a bit too high for them. So they're a type of blue tongue lizard kind of thing. But they're a bit more robust and they don't handle the moisture as well. They are found kind of throughout New South Wales, just not really in the Illawarra. The other interesting thing about the shinglebacks, like the blue tongues, they've got they used to be called, they're kind of called the bog eye because they've got a little kind of dent on the top of their head, and that's what you call a third eye. Now they use that as like a light sensor, so it's not an eye like you see kind of shapes and whatnot. It's an eye that it detects light and shade. So if a bird flies between the shingleback, so like an eagle, flies between the shingleback and the sun, that will pick up that shade, and this shingleback can get in and hide without actually having to turn its head and kind of look up at the sun. So the shinglebacks, they love to eat snails, fruit and veggies. We'll feed it strawberries, the occasional chicken heart they love to munch down on. They'll eat, in captivity, we'll feed them a bit of grated carrot, bearded dragon pellets. In the wild, they'll eat flowers and fruit and snails and slugs. They're a bit slow for crickets and roaches, but that doesn't mean they won't go for them if they get the opportunity and it kind of wanders across their face and they can get a quick snap on it. They'll swallow it down. Opportunistic, I guess. These guys also, a very interesting thing about them, when they shed, they kind of, unlike normal lizards, they kind of shed a bit like snakes, where they slide out of the entire skin. So often you get the skin and it's got the legs and the body all attached, and you get like a full skin of a lizard kind of thing, which is very rare to see with the lizards. They usually shed in little tiny pieces and you just have a whole mess in the enclosure, but this one kind of sheds in one big kind of chunk. So that's all the time we got up here today. So we're going to do some holes just down by the side, and yeah, thanks for watching, guys.